IRB presents CNBC TV 18 Mint Budget 2016, The Verdict.
Good evening, Shireen. Good evening, friends. Very glad to be here with you this evening, the day after the budget. Shireen was asking the previous panel, what would you do now that the quarantine is over? And I think Dr. Adia said it exactly right, which is the real hard work begins now, because now we have to explain and defend and execute what is a very, very compelling vision that the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Finance Minister have laid out for us. It's interesting also that you have termed the show The Verdict, because the verdict, as I will tell you as a student of India's economic history, comes much later. In the long sweep of history, we need 10 or 15 years really to tell whether a budget has truly been historic or not. In the meanwhile, of course, we'll get flashes. So we got a flash today when the equity markets, of course, rallied the way that they did. But in some ways, the bond market tells you more. And I think those of you that track the bond market, as I do on my Bloomberg all the time, the yield on the 10-year T in India had gone up to close to 8%. I'm very pleased to tell you that today it's at 7.62%. And the rupee has also strengthened. And as these bond yields come down, as taxpayers, all of you should be delighted, because what it means is that the government's debt burden comes down as well. There's more fiscal space that becomes available to be able to put into some of the deserving causes that we all want to support. And on that, I will stop and tell you a little bit of what I think the historical verdict, not today's verdict, not the market's verdict, but what I think in the grand sweep of history will be remembered as far as this budget is concerned. I have, in fact, as a student of India's economic history, read through every single budget speech, not just once, but twice over. So I have a little bit of context in terms of what is remembered now of the 91 budget, the 97 budget, the budgets of 2000, 2001, the infamous budget of 2008, and so on. And as I look at that sweep of history, I have to believe that the verdict on this budget will rest on three very important pillars. Those will be, I think, considered the genuinely historic achievements. First and foremost, I think we have made a quantum change when it comes to public investment. And there is always, when people talk about roads, when people talk about irrigation, the way Mr. Kant was talking about irrigation right now, or they talk about railways, the temptation is to go to what's in the budget. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not just what's in the budget. Part of our effort in the last budget and this budget is to really build up the off-budgetary resources through a series of innovative financing institutions. In the last budget, we announced the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, which is now taking shape and will be operational this year. The structure that we put together enables us to create significant leverage when it comes to infrastructure investing. And that comes from other long-term investors that we will partner with. And that is an off-budgetary resource for infrastructure that's going to be a very powerful driver of growth going forward. In this budget, as Mr. Kant was saying, we have created a long-term irrigation fund with 20,000 crores by further capitalizing NABARD and making NABARD, which has been very successful in driving agricultural development, and making that a very powerful partner in moving irrigation forward. We have also created the Higher Education Financing Agency with a capital base of 1,000 crores and a debt capacity of 10,000 crores that will enable us to invest in our higher education infrastructure as well. So the whole approach towards public investment, that is really building it up and supplementing it with these off-budgetary resources, I think is going to be viewed in history as something quite remarkable that we've done. Think about the new institutions we have created to be able to drive this investment forward. Remember the very seminal role that NHAI has played in the growth of our national highways, and you'll start to get the kind of impact that NIF can have in the next 10-20 years. India's de facto sovereign wealth fund. The second very major accomplishment that I think needs to be highlighted is how we are changing, and Dr. Adhya is driving this, and you should compliment him for his visionary and very far-sighted approach to this, is how we are changing the tax ecosystem, the relationship between the tax authorities and the taxpayers. If you look at what we're doing with respect to dispute resolution, penalties, appeals, online filing, assessments, all of this, and all of you as business people, and I myself as a business person can tell you that interface is broken today between the taxpayer, the chartered accountant, the tax lawyer, and the tax authorities. We are repairing that system. And that in itself is, I think, going to be recognized as something that genuinely is a transformative step forward. That's the second really, really important thing that we've done in this budget. Now, I've reserved, and this is my own humble opinion, I've reserved the best for last. The best for last. Because I think what we're doing with respect to Social Security, the statutory backing that we will be providing for Aadhaar, the direct benefit transfer mechanisms that we are putting in place, and the ability to be able to deliver benefits to beneficiaries as targeted, the ability to be able to provide health cover to our most vulnerable people, truly is going to be historic. Now, it's upon us and all of us as citizens to be able to actually deliver this and make this happen. But if we can have this social security architecture, this social security platform, as Nandan has called it, this India stack. I'm a technologist, so I love that stuff. This India stack, and make it work for that last old lady in that last village in Nagaland, as far away from Delhi as we can possibly make it, and make it work for her, ladies and gentlemen, then I think it will be a truly historic achievement. And I think not only will this budget be remembered for that, it will be remembered by that old lady for that purpose as well. I think that would be a remarkable achievement if we can pull it off.
Mr. Sinha, thank you very much for your opening remarks. I'm going to request you to please take a seat there, sir, right in the middle, while we get the budget team to join you on stage as well. But we are going to take a quick commercial break as we get the budget team to join the Minister of State for Finance, Mr. Jayant Sinha, on stage, and take questions from corporate India. We're back in a moment on the budget verdict, a special CNBC TV 18 Mint presentation.
IRB presents CNBC TV 18 Mint Budget 2016, The Verdict.
Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV 18 Mint Budget Verdict, and that is the power-packed panel on stage. We've got the Minister of State for Finance, Jayant Sinha, along with him the budget team, Mr. Adhya, Mr. Das, and Mr. Neeraj Gupta, the Disinvestment Secretary, and also my colleague Anil Padmanabhan. Anil, before I get more questions here from captains of Indian industry, I toss it back to you.
Thank you, Shireen. Mr. Das, if I can ask you a question which is one of the criticisms of this budget, that you have undercapitalized for the entire banking, PSU banks, that you haven't put in enough money into capitalization. Is that true, or it's an overstated case?
The Indradhanush document, which was released last year, projected capital infusion of 25,000 crores during 16-17. So that has been provided in the budget. The finance minister in his speech has also made a very clear indication, and in fact a very strong statement, that if additional resources or if additional recapitalization money is required, the government will find the resources for it, and the government will back the public sector banks. One more step which the Reserve Bank of India has taken today around 5 o'clock, many of you might have missed it. They have issued a notification which enables the public sector banks as well as the private banks, all banks in fact, to do three things. Number one, the notification says that the assets owned by the foreign branches of Indian Bank can be revalued and can be taken into account for the purpose of calculating Tier 1 capital. The Reserve Bank circular also says that the real estate owned by the banks in India can also be revalued and can be taken into account for calculating the Tier 1 capital. Then there is a third thing, which is a deferred tax amount. It's technical, I'm not going into the details.
Sure.
But broadly, we have done a quick calculation. And I feel, based on our internal calculation, that more than 25,000 crores will get added to the Tier 1 capital of public sector banks alone.
On the back of the decision that's been taken by the Reserve Bank today, 25,000 crores.
Reserve Bank has notified it
That's
today
right.
around 5 p.m.
5 p.m., yes.
So 25,000 crore is what we have provided in the budget. The decision of the Reserve Bank of India also brings in another 25,000 crore on the table. So therefore, the recapitalization of banks, they get a support of 50,000 crores. Plus, there is a commitment of the finance minister to do a further top-up if that is required. So you have to see it in that particular context.
Mr. Das, let me add to that. I was struck by a statement that Mr. Chidambaram had in the newspaper some days ago, where he said that he didn't believe that as far as the RBI is concerned, that they had people in the government that they could sit across the table and work with. It struck me as this odd statement, given that Dr. Rajan and I went to IIT Delhi together. We are actually batchmates. We've not just sat across conference room tables, we've sat across TT
The mess
tables, the mess table, the tennis court, and a whole variety of other places you don't want to know about. So,
No, we do want to know about. Please do tell.
So as a result of that, you can imagine that the cooperation and the collaboration between the government and Reserve Bank of India, I think, is unprecedented. And of course, we have worked very closely with the Reserve Bank of India, some of the steps that you're seeing now, to ensure that our banks are well capitalized and that under any stress test scenario are fully able to meet either the Reserve Bank of India capital adequacy norms or the Basel III requirements. We have run any number of spreadsheets, considered all kinds of scenarios, and to the best of our analysis, our sense is post the March 31st, 2016 numbers in terms of NPA recognition and so on, the numbers that we have in the budget right now, plus the additional steps that the RBI has taken, will be adequate to meet all such norms. Of course, as we move forward, as consolidation picks up pace and so on, the circumstances may change, but exactly as Mr. Das is saying, we in government are standing in support of all of our public sector banks, and we will make sure that we have a vibrant and globally competitive set of public sector banks.
You know, this is the third or the fourth, if I've been counting the headlines that we're getting from this event, I think this is the fourth big headline that we've got here from the government, that the measures that have been taken by the Reserve Bank today, or the notification, will add about 25,000 crore rupees in Tier 1 capital for the public sector banking system. And this is going to be good news that the markets will react to tomorrow morning as well. But if I may take this conversation forward, sir, as far as the recapitalization plan is concerned, the Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. Subramaniam, in the Economic Survey has laid out a 4R prescription for the reformation and the recapitalization of banks. One of the ideas that he's put on the table there, and since we're talking about cooperation with the Reserve Bank of India, is to actually leverage government equity in the Reserve Bank of India and use that as a means of recapitalization. Where do things currently stand on that idea? Is it merely an idea? Has any formal, informal conversation happened around that? Can we expect this to be taken forward?
There are many alternatives that are constantly under consideration. There are many policy options available to us. Banks have non-core assets. Banks have different kinds of equity and non-equity instruments that they can issue. There are assets that can be monetized, such as real estate, as was pointed out. Banks can work their balance sheets harder. They can be much more efficient in the way in which they use their capital. So there are a variety of alternatives that are available to us to continue to ensure that our banks have absolutely robust balance sheets, and we will certainly continue to consider all those alternatives.
IRB presents CNBC TV 18 Mint Budget 2016, The Verdict.
Naina Lal Kidwai on the spot now. And Naina, you've heard what Mr. Sinha and Mr. Das have had to say as far as the recap plan is concerned. And perhaps there was a little bit of disappointment in the market because of the 25,000 crore rupee figure, but the government has caveated that, saying that they will provide more capital if needed. On the back of what you've heard this evening, how does the story pan out?
I must say, I think I'm quite struck by the fact that, yes, the plan was set out last year, the 70,000, of which 25,000 this year is a reflection of that overarching plan. But the fact that there's an attempt to address it on the grounds that that 25,000 this year may not be enough, and to do it whether through the announcements now made by the RBI or indeed the finance minister's own statement that he was solidly behind ensuring that if more was required, it would be done, because I do believe more than the 25,000 would be required. But I do want to also laud what you're doing simultaneously, which is addressing the problem, which is the NPAs that are causing the problem in the first place. And there's an attempt to do that, whether through the SARFAESI Act and mention of that in the budget, or outside the budget through the bankruptcy bill. But it is an area that needs addressing. I think the area which maybe has not been said enough, but it's not necessarily something that you have to say in the budget, is about equity raising that could happen, which might lead to some dilution possibly of these banks. And if indeed you're going to chuck this into the Niti Aayog, who looks at and addresses everything from strategic stake sales to disinvestment, it would be good to see it go into some kind of a zone where all of these solutions are also looked at.
Nena, as far as the capital raising requirements through Indradhanush are required, we had run a number of scenarios, and our sense was that the banks, even after taking into account where the NPAs could net out, would require about 1.8 lakh crores of equity capital. This is CET1 capital, not necessarily Tier 1 capital, so it's CET1 capital. So that was our estimate. As of now, we haven't seen anything that would require us to change that. Obviously, we've consulted very closely with RBI. They've run their numbers, we've run our numbers, and we've kind of still netted out at that 1.8 lakh crores. Now, the question, of course, in that 1.8 lakh crores is if government puts in 70,000 and we need another 1.1 lakh crores, and I may remind you, this is to meet the Basel III requirements of 2019, and it also assumes a credit growth number across the public sector banks of 12%. Now, we've varied that, but on across each of the public sector banks, depending on their ability to grow, but effectively across the system-wide average is 12%. So that's the credit growth assumption that's in there. With that credit growth assumption, taking into account where the NPAs are at, CET1 capital, the question really will then become, will we be able to raise the 1.1 lakh crores from the markets or not? To my mind, that's the big uncertainty, and we'll have to see. I think the 70,000 crores from the government will be forthcoming. We've already provisioned for that in the budget. The 1.1 lakh crores is really a bit of a question mark. Then, of course, there are contingencies with respect to the NPAs themselves and the provisioning that will be required as far as that is concerned. To some extent, that is going to be dependent on certain factors that may not be within our control. For instance, what is happening in the steel sector. So we'll have to just see how all of this develops. I think as the consolidation moves forward, we also recognize that there are certain banks that have more than adequate capital as well. And so we'll see exactly what the Bank Board Bureau comes up with. Just to answer your second comment regarding this whole consolidation process and who's in fact going to lead that, our sense on that has consistently been that it has to be a bottoms-up process. The banks have to take ownership. If you were a private company or a private sector company, just like, for example, when Kotak went through its merger, it's the bank, the managers of the bank, the directors of the bank that drive the process. Similarly, it has to happen here. But we think the Bank Board Bureau can play an invaluable role. That's really part of their charter, more so than it would be for Niti Aayog. And so we will see how all of those consolidation processes play out between the banks themselves and the Bank Board Bureau.
A quick final question on this issue as far as banks and NPAs are concerned before I move to other issues. In our conversation that we had yesterday, you very clearly said that the bad bank idea is not an idea that the government intends to take forward. You intend to address the NPA situation by way of the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, which you believe can also raise a stressed asset fund. How soon can we expect movement on that front to address stressed areas like, for instance, the steel sector?
Now, that is happening even as we speak, and in fact, the interim investment advisor that we have in NIF right now are in fact looking at a pipeline of opportunities. But please recognize that dealing with the NPAs is a multi-dimensional situation, a multi-dimensional effort. Obviously, we have to reduce the stress in various industries. We are doing that, for example, with the minimum import price in steel and Uday that we have in the power sector. We also have to equip the banks much better with resolution capabilities. They're certainly doing that through the JLFs, the CDRs, and the SDR. That also is something that we are working on. Longer term, we have to bring into force the bankruptcy code, which we are hopeful will get passed in the second session of Parliament. That's another element in all of this. And then third, I think that the private sector through the ARCs and their own special situation funds also have a catalytic role to play, which is why we've introduced the 100% FDI in ARC and the pass-through capabilities in the ARC as well, which has been very well received also.
Yeah.
So by putting in place all these different mechanisms, by solving this problem in this multidimensional way, we think we'll get a grip on this in this fashion.
So bad bank, that idea has died even before it started.
We've consulted with a lot of leading experts on this matter. Recently, we had a policy charcha in the North Block where we had people from the IMF, people that had worked on the TARP, advisors from across the world. I think the consensus generally was that a TARP-like facility, a stressed assets facility, actually it makes much more sense, because a bank is a deposit-taking institution.
Yeah.
Why would you set up a deposit-taking institution to deal with stressed assets? And the US, as you know, was very successful in doing it through TARP. So I think that's where global best practice is right now, not a bad bank.
IRB presents CNBC TV 18 Mint Budget 2016, The Verdict.